So welcome back to our next webinar. The last one was sort of a big overview about a lot of the issues and kind of how to get started. And then this week, we're talking about basically an overview of all of the decisions that you're going to need to make so that, you know, if you're looking to plan a kitchen right now, you'll have some key terms that you can look up on the web and start researching and just sort of have an outline of all of the things that you'll need to think about and how they kind of all go together. So if we could go to the next slide, Helen. So the decisions really and the priority for your decisions are based on two things. The first thing is the expense and the impact of that decision, and that's why most people usually start with cabinets. That's sort of the biggest ticket item of the whole installation, not counting the labor, and it really has the biggest impact on the overall look of your kitchen. Most people have pretty strong ideas about what they want it to look like, so that's usually sort of the first thing that we look at. And then you should sort of prioritize the rest of your decisions based on how many choices are available within that category. And what I mean by that is there are certain things where you have fewer choices and you really want to coordinate together right at the beginning. And then other things, you have a ton of choices and you don't have to kind of worry about getting stuck by the choices you've made previously and not have any good choices left for the rest of the things that you want to have to make your kitchen look the way you want it to look. So along with cabinets, I always recommend to my customers that we look at countertops at the same time because there are sort of more limited options in countertops, and I would hate to have somebody fall in love with a certain kind of finish in their cabinets and then not be able to find a countertop that they like. So those are two pretty big ticket items that it makes a lot of sense to work on together. It's also really important to figure out your appliances pretty early in the process because it impacts not just the way the kitchen looks and the budget, but also what the layout looks like. And that's something that we work on pretty early. And I don't think we're there yet though. And then also flooring, we'll touch on that just a little bit. There's a lot of choices with that also. If you're looking at wood floors and a site installed and finished, there are about 1 million different stain colors and finishes that you can choose from. So you can choose that a little bit after to make it go with your other choices. And then hardware and backsplash tiles sort of have the most choices in style and finish and all that kind of stuff. So you can leave those till last. Some people have a vision and they know what they want it to look like, and we can make all those selections up front, and it's good. Sometimes backsplash tile, especially backsplash tile, can have a little bit of a longer lead time. So if you can order that up front, it's good. But if you are just overwhelmed, and I have a lot of customers who are overwhelmed by sort of abstracting the number of choices that have been made, it's fine to sort of let your cabinets and countertop get installed and then bring a whole lot of backsplash and hardware samples in and figure out, what you like once it's installed and in your place. So we're going to go on to the next topic that Becky's going to do, and it's about trends, which, we are always keeping in mind when making decisions. So Becky, you're muted.
Everyone hear me now? Okay. Talking about trends, it's obviously a big thing with our industry, and one of the biggest questions that our clients ask is it a good idea to follow them? And the answer is usually, if it's something, if you especially love for your house, then by all means, I would go with them. But you just have to be cautious about it because especially in a kitchen, that's a big ticket item, and for the most part, these are fixed things like cabinetry, countertops, backsplashes that you can't easily change. So some advice might be to go with, paint colors or hardware that's trending that can be easily swapped out, and it's a minimal change. As far as trends that we've seen for, I would say, a good amount of time now is, because we're in a coastal community, we're always getting the call for the capey and beachy looks. And I think it's just a given because of where we are. And that also, I think, extends into the South Shore of Massachusetts, just because it is all coastal. What we're seeing trend-wise with all of that is mixing of colors, not everything being so matchy-matchy or monochromatic. Like shown in this slide, you've got a blue island with some blue cabinet accents. It's a great way to also make the space your own and unique from other projects, where you can bring in these little pops of color, but you're not necessarily committing everything to that color. We're also seeing a lot of mixed materials with different metals, as again seen in this center slide, where you've got that kind of gold looking light fixture with more silver hardware and faucets. We're also seeing a lot of the reclaimed wood products that, whether it's something that, you found yourself or you've gone to a supplier that can supply that stuff. That's what I think has been trending the last couple of years, and bringing all of those different materials together for the projects, and it not just being everything is completely the same. And again, it's always a personal preference, and go with what you love, because if you absolutely love it, then you're not making any wrong decisions.
So we're going to talk a little bit about cabinets now, and sort of the way we envisioned this series of webinars was to start more general and then get more specific. So what I'm going to do is give you just a very broad overview about issues that you should be thinking about regarding cabinets, and then later we'll do another webinar that's specifically about cabinets, and we'll have images that demonstrate all of these concepts so that you can understand that. But right now, I'll sort of run through a list of terms that you can Google and do a little bit of research on your own. And like I said, just give you kind of a broad overview. So last time we sort of introduced this concept of good, better, best as a way to look at the cabinets. But in talking, we decided that was maybe not super descriptive and a little bit superficial. So we came up with some other categories that really, all of our product is good. It's just a matter of what it is and how fast you can get it. So we came up with these 4 categories that I think are a little bit more useful as descriptive terms as far as what you would get with the different levels of cabinetry. The first level is stock. And these are this has a very small spec book, very few cabinet options available, very few sizes available. It's just really the standard stuff. There are very few choices as far as door style. Definitely white shaker, gray shaker, maybe like 1 or 2 stains. And also a big difference as you go up through the levels is the cabinet hardware. And when I say hardware, I don't mean pulls and knobs, I mean the drawer glides. There's pretty much no cabinets you can get nowadays that don't have some of the basics that everybody's come to expect. They have dovetail drawers, they have full extension, soft close drawer glides, but there are different levels of quality in those soft close drawer glides. So we'll talk about that much more specifically when we talk about cabinets, but in your value line, it's not going to be a super heavy duty hardware that it comes with. And these cabinets are appropriate for, like garage workshops and in frequently used kitchens and vanities and summer homes, things that you'll be using and not really using very hard, but you want to keep on a low budget. And then the next category is made to order. This would be kind of like a good level of cabinet. It has a longer lead time because it's not in stock, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks usually for these cabinets, because they've sort of made their production process efficient by having a limited number of cabinets, a limited number of options, although definitely way more than stock. Limited sizing. You can make some very minor size modifications, but usually you can't change the width of anything. Everything's on like a 3-inch increment. and they keep their production time down by usually keeping those doors in stock. So they're not making all the doors to order, but they're making your cabinets to order. They're not just pulling cabinets off a shelf and shipping them to you. They tend to have better hardware than the value cabinets do, and they're appropriate for, you know, guest houses and homes, and also even modest year-round homes. These cabinets will hold up over time. If you're looking for something that you're going to use all year round and, you know, for years to come. And then when you bump up to better, that's what we call semi-custom, where they're also made to order, but there's more of the process that's made in the factory. The biggest thing is size modification. The spec books are much larger. There's a lot larger choice in what cabinets you can get and the function of those cabinets. There's more choice in door style and finish, although it's still not completely infinite for that, but there are definitely a lot more choices, and some of the lines you can customize a little bit about the doors, and we'll talk about that more when we talk about just cabinets. And then we also carry full custom lines, which has also a much longer lead time. You can figure out more like 6, 7, 8 weeks for those, but you have infinite choices. If you want a wood that's not super popular, they'll track down that door, or they'll make it for you, and they'll track down all of the cabinet parts they need to make for you. The one thing I didn't say about the semi-custom as far as hardware goes, they all use basically the best hardware, which is either Bloom or Blum. I've heard it said both ways. You pretty much top out at the top of the line hardware there, and then custom uses the same thing. And it's appropriate for, you know, your high-end summer houses or high-end year-round houses, anywhere where you want to do something that's sort of at the norm of what you can get with standard modifications and semi-custom, or if you want a level of finish that is higher, that's also a good thing to do. And like I said, we'll talk a lot about cabinets. This is just an overview. Fallon, if we could go to the next slide. So people sometimes seem surprised that we do full custom at a home center, and a bunch of us do a fair number of custom jobs. We usually get them through contractors who we have a relationship with, but you know, if you're looking and thinking why you might want to do full custom with us rather than through a full custom builder, there's a few reasons for that, and one of that is the cost. And there's a bunch of things that lead into cost. One of the things is that our design fees for the kitchen are built into the cost of the kitchen, so you won't be paying somebody else to do your initial design and work with you on that. The other part of cost, though, is when you think about most kitchens, even the most custom kitchens have some very, very basic components to it, that they have drawer bases, they have sink bases, and then usually there's like a few pieces that are customized. It's not usually the whole kitchen that is completely custom, except for maybe like finish or door style or something like that. So what a higher end factory setting gets you is you get that cost benefit of being able to produce the simple stuff in a more streamlined factory setting. And then the way most custom factories work is they have sort of the master carpenter guy who will build the stuff that's out of the norm off to the side. So you're not sort of paying for your whole kitchen to be created by that single guy who's doing it. You can sort of economize where it doesn't really matter and still have the benefit of a craftsman building something that's really special. The other thing that's sort of a benefit to getting a custom product from a factory setting is consistency, both consistency and durability in finish and construction, because it's usually they have very high-end finishing equipment, and because it's in a factory, it's in a very controlled environment. And then the other thing is lead time is usually a lot shorter. It can be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. Custom jobs can be much longer than that. So we just want to encourage everybody to not just think of us as a home center, but we have a lot of really talented designers who can do your custom special designs for you. And we've done it very successful with a lot of people already. So we can next. So then cabinetry, these are just a whole bunch of terms that you can think about, but we'll talk about this in a lot more detail and really explain what all of that is in a seminar devoted to cabinetry. But sort of the first big decision you need to make about cabinets is whether you want framed or frameless. Framed are the cabinets that you see in most places. It's the most common in England. It's the most traditional construction style. And you have the most options in frame generally because you can get from stock all the way up to full custom in framed cabinets. Frameless is sometimes also called Euro cabinets. They are the major benefit to frameless, and a lot of people who have small spaces gravitate them, and a lot of people who come from areas where this is their second home, who come from areas that either do a lot of modern kitchens or have very small kitchens where you need to maximize every inch, use frameless. And the biggest benefit to frameless is that your drawer boxes are wider because the face frame is not taking away from the dimension of your drawer boxes. So we'll talk a lot more about that and show pictures and help explain that. Another thing that you should think about is construction. Even our stock cabinets are made with plywood. We can downgrade cabinets to particle board. We don't really recommend it in this climate. Construction is a very regional thing, and we're in a very wet kind of climate with large humidity swings from summer to winter. So we find that plywood holds up way better. I went to a kitchen thing and met people from Colorado where it's very dry and there's not a very huge variability in humidity in the area, and they use all particle board. Like, I was shocked that in like a high-end house that would rival, you know, an expensive house on Martha's Vineyard where they're putting 6 figures of cabinetry in it, they use particle board, which was just completely shocking to me. But it's a very regional thing. In this region, you can save a little bit by going to particle board, but we don't really recommend it. Overlays. So here I'm just going to throw out a few terms for you to look up if you want to. Standard or partial overlay is one. Full overlay is another, and then inset. And again, in the cabinet thing, we'll talk about that in much more detail, but in general, standard overlay is the least expensive. Full overlay is available in both framed and frameless, and frameless is only available in full overlay, and then inset overlay is the most expensive. It's the most expensive base price, and then it's more expensive in the modifications you sort of want to do to make it look built in and done the right way. And we'll talk about that again more when we talk about cabinetry. And then door and drawer styles, we do a ton of shaker here, but there are certainly other door styles available. There are variations on the shaker, and we can talk about that in more detail. But if you're looking for some terms to look up, you know, look up flat panel versus raised panel. You can think about also reverse raised panel, which puts a flat panel on the front but gives you a heavier center panel like a raised panel would. The raise is actually on the back side of it. And then other issues and decisions you need to make is whether you want a 5-part drawer front, which is what's shown in the middle image over there. It's actually shown in all these images where the drawer front matches the doors versus slab versus some combination. Sometimes people like doing just the small drawers in slab and the bigger drawers in 5-part. So those are some issues you want to think about when it comes to door and drawer style. In general, the more simple the door, the less expensive it will be. The more elaborate, the more expensive it is. And we'll talk about what makes it more elaborate under the cabinetry webinar. And then finishes. The 2 basic finishes that people consider are either stained wood or paint. Paint usually carries an upcharge, so it does add a little bit of cost, but the base of paint is less expensive. Stain does not usually carry an upcharge except for certain specialty finishes, but the wood that you choose can carry an upcharge. So if you want a base wood like oak, which not a lot of people are doing right now, plain oak, and stain, that will be your least expensive option. Most people don't do that. But so just know that those are some of the things that will influence both the look of your kitchen and your budget. And then storage solutions is something that we look at also. Cabinet companies offer a lot of basically installed in the factory, so you know it will fit, you know it will work, and your contractor doesn't have to install it. But there's also some aftermarket options that we can order from you from Revshelf and Hayfella. If you want to look at either of those websites to see what's available, you can look at that. So with that, we're going to move on to counters, and Becky is going to take over again.
All right, so for countertops, there's 4 main materials that are listed: laminate, stone, quartz, and solid surface, such as Corian. These we're still seeing mostly quartz being specified by most clients. Quartz or natural stone. We do still get some call for laminate and solid surface. It just depends on the application. As far as price-wise, laminate is typically the least expensive. You can find, say if you're doing a small project, you don't want to spend a lot of money, laminate is still great for laundry rooms where there's no water being used, even though you can have water on that surface, just because it's so much less expensive than doing a stone. So laundry rooms, desktop surfaces. Personally, for a desktop, I don't really like working at a stone countertop just because it's so much colder than the other materials. And then just small areas in the home, if you have built-ins or something like that and you don't want to, you know, have the expense of a stone countertop. Corian can also be used in those areas too, that it's typically a little bit less than some of the stone materials. But again, that can also be used in bathrooms. We see a lot of that used in bathrooms, not so much in the kitchen, however, it can be used there. The beauty of Corian, which is unlike Corian or solid surface, which is unlike, I believe, every other material, it is fully repairable. So if it scratches, stains, burns, is gouged, it can be completely repaired, which is unlike any of the other materials that are listed. As I said before, the quartz and the natural stones are still, you know, the predominant materials that we're using in kitchens and bathrooms. A lot of the times people ask, you know, what's the benefit of one versus the other? The quartz is a man-made slab of stone out of typically about 90 to 93% ground quartz, which is a natural element. The rest is bonding agents, fillers, and the dyes to create the different patterns. So the biggest advantage to quartz is that it is not porous, so bacteria can't penetrate it. It's stain resistant, scratch resistant, and heat resistant. That being said, we do recommend that anytime heat is involved, that you do absolutely use hot plates. That is a misconception that it is not heat proof by any means. So what can happen with, say, a hot pot, if you were to put it down, over time it could affect that surface, and it's more the bonding agents and fillers and dyes within that material that can be affected, but the quartz will actually not be affected, the actual ground quartz. One of the biggest differences too that you will see between the man-made materials and then a natural stone is that natural stone is just actually taken out of the ground. So it has a beautiful natural element to it that really can't be replicated by a man-made material. So that can be a game changer for a lot of people, because it's some of the stones that you find in nature are just absolutely stunning. That being said, the quartz materials have come a long way since their inception, when they used to just be more like a Corian surface and they had just little speckles. Now you're seeing them, like in the slide that we're looking at, the bottom left is a quartz, I think a Cambria, where you get the really big veining throughout. So they are made to look more like natural materials. The other nice thing that has come out, I would say within the last year or so, is a lot of these quartz brands that we carry, they have mostly polished finishes, which is a high shine finish, but they're also coming out with these matte or suede finishes. So you get more of the effect of, say, a concrete type of finish where it's not as shiny. So it allows you to kind of mix and match these different finishes within the same space. So if you didn't like the look of a high polish, this is a great option. Sometimes it can be a little bit more expensive, but it's definitely worth quoting to see the difference. And it can also change the appearance of the stone a little bit. So it's definitely something to look at. Another tip that, you know, we recommend a lot of the times for small spaces and bathrooms and stuff is going to the different fabricators to look at their remnant selection. And the remnants are basically leftovers from bigger jobs. Say if it's a rectangle cut out of a kitchen that wasn't used at the time, they add it to their stock. So sometimes you can get a really beautiful piece of stone, and it's also less expensive because it's basically leftovers that they're trying to get rid of. So again, you can get a really spectacular stone for a small space that you would be paying less than you would normally pay if you had to buy the whole slab. The backsplashes. I would say the three typical applications that we're seeing, like in the photos shown on the slide, those are all tile backsplash, where typically you would have whatever your countertop material is go right up to the wall, and then from above that to, you know, usually up to the bottom of the cabinets, you would have a nice tile backsplash. This allows you to bring in kind of these accent materials and colors and funky patterns to make the space your own. So the tile backsplash is typically what most people are putting in their kitchens. Another option, which is not shown, is to do a matching backsplash to your countertop material. And typically what happens is you come up about 4 inches from the countertop up the wall, and then above that you would just have a painted wall finish. And then another option is to have the same backsplash all the way up that matches the countertop, and that's called a full height backsplash, which is actually shown in the bottom 2 pictures in this slide. So basically you're carrying your countertop material up the wall. It's a durable finish. It can be costly, so it's just something that you can always price out as an option if you really love that type of material you're using on the countertop. And like I said, this is a great spot where you can really get creative. You can bring in other colors, textures, materials with the tile backsplash. As far as flooring is concerned, like Lisa mentioned, we'll probably do some other webinars that get more specific about, you know, the different aspects of your projects, the cabinets, flooring, countertops. We do have flooring experts at Mid-Cape, so feel free, you can visit our website, midcape.net, and I'm not sure if they have profiles on there, but I think Fallon could speak to that. But obviously flooring is an integral part of a house, and it's something you definitely want to, you know, have an idea for your project, what type of flooring, the material, color, because that's typically, you know, the most product that you have is your flooring throughout your house. And it's also, like you see in these photos, you can either do hardwood throughout, you can split up rooms by doing, say, tile in the bathrooms and then hardwood throughout the rest of the house. So again, this is a big part of your project, so it's definitely something when you're starting to plan your kitchen project or bathroom project you really want to think about. Hardware. So hardware is typical, when we talk about hardware, it's typically decorative hardware, you know, your fixtures as far as your faucets, your sinks, lighting. This is, again, like with the tile, this is another way that you can bring in some accents to kind of, you know, make the space your own. We do, especially in this coastal community, we do a lot with the nautical style hardware. We have a couple different brands that you can see through our website that have pretty real looking, you know, seashells, sea life, rock knobs that are made from actual beach stones. If you didn't want to do something like that for the entire kitchen, say, you could use them on just accent pieces, maybe just on the island or on glass cabinets. And then also you want to bring those in with the different textures. You can see on the faucet, excuse me one second, bringing in all of the different finishes like the faucets and the decorative hardware, your lighting fixtures, you know, as far as the materials that are used. That's another thing that you can change up within the same space. Say if you have a separate piece like an island, you could do the same fixture, but you could just do it in different finishes. And most of the hardware finishes are consistent throughout the different companies. We can do chrome, brushed nickel. We're seeing some of the brass finishes come back, but just in more matte finishes. Again, the great way to personalize your space with the different hardware, and it's amazing how whatever your hardware selection is can change the entire look of the cabinetry.
So then this is a pretty major thing as far as kitchen planning goes, but we sort of stuck it at the end. I think Orleans sells appliances. We don't sell or service appliances at my location, but I like to still have a long conversation with people about it, because it really is an important aspect to planning your kitchen. I'm not sure if we have another webinar planned on appliances, but I'd like to, because I love to cook and I'm kind of an appliance nerd myself. So if somebody's willing to listen, I will talk their ear off about the various options. But here are just a couple of sort of categories that you need to think about really right at the beginning, and what are the sizes. Dishwashers are standard 24 inches, so it doesn't require a lot of planning for those. If it's a teeny tiny kitchen, you can get an 18-inch dishwasher, but 99% of the people use the standard 24, even in small kitchens. For ranges, 30 inches is the standard width. Some people get bigger than that. Some people get smaller than that. They make a 24-inch apartment size, again, if you're in a tiny space. So for planning purposes, that's the most important piece of information, is what the width is. For refrigerators, most people do with 36, and you want to think about whether you want to do full depth or counter depth for those. And then for microwaves, those sizes are pretty standard within the categories that you have for them. You know, if you do an over the range, those come 30 inches to match a standard range. And then you also want to think about the types. And when I say types, you want to think about whether you want to do built-in appliances. For a refrigerator, you know, if you're doing a high-end job and you're doing a Sub-Zero or Thermador, those are built-in appliances. You want to think about whether you want to panel them or use stainless panels for them, and that goes for dishwashers and refrigerators both. And Sub-Zero has kind of changed how they do it now, and I like how they do it, is that all of their new line of appliances are panel ready, and you either buy the stainless panel directly from the manufacturer, or you can order a panel for cabinetry, but it's sort of the same installation detail for both of them. And then another thing to think about of type is whether you want gas or electric cooking. And that's like sort of the freestanding versus built-in is another thing. So sometimes people want a separate range, a separate cooktop versus wall ovens. That really works better in a larger kitchen. Some people want to stack a cooktop with an oven so that they can pick those two specifically. It is very difficult to do that because of the clearances required by both appliances. It's possible, but it's not possible for all combinations of appliances. In fact, it's not possible for many combinations of appliances. So I try to steer people away from that. And then the other thing that happens when you build a wall oven into a cabinet, a base cabinet, is that the door ends up opening very low. So it's not a super practical thing. But those are the kind of things that you want to think about. And then also, as far as microwaves go, you can do a micro hood You can do a built-in drawer microwave, you can do a wall microwave, or you can just set one on the counter or set it on a shelf in a pantry or something like that. And then the other thing that I think people maybe don't spend enough time on is the ventilation type. If you cook, you really want to think about making sure that you have proper ventilation. I'm a serial smoke detector setter offer. Everybody knows when I'm done cooking because the whole house is going off like crazy sometimes because we don't have, I live in a rental and we don't have fantastic ventilation for over the hood. But if you do cook, you really want to put some thought and research into that and make sure you get something that will work for you. And planning is very important because different ranges have different requirements as far as clearances go. And your designer really needs to see the spec on both the hood and the range. And they can also really impact what your design looks like as far as your choices with standing hoods, cabinet style hoods, and we can go into that in a little more detail, but these are just some of the issues that you need to think about as far as selecting your appliances and beginning initial planning stages of your kitchen. So I think that's about it.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. That was great. Thank you, ladies, for all that information. I know that there's a lot to listen to and there's a ton more to be shared. So keep an eye out for our webinar series information. We will continue to send those to you. Lisa did touch on the the cabinetry webinar to come next week, which we have sent out an email or two about, I believe. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute your microphones and come on and ask them. The ladies are still here to answer any of your questions, and if not, you can see some contact information below. I will also send an email with their contact information to follow this up if you have any questions that you think of later on. So I will open the floor.
Lisa?
Yes.
This is Eve Reed. I have a question, but I'm not sure. I was taking notes the whole time, and thank you, both of you, for not talking too fast.
You're welcome.
But you mentioned a company, and you just went past the name of it. It was something and something. Can you remember? And I can't even remember where we were at that point. Let me look. Do you have any idea, a particular company you noted?
I don't remember.
You know what? I'll look for it a little bit more and maybe email you.
What was it? Do you remember what was in
Did it
reference
start
to?
with an R?
Was it Revishelf?
Oh, yeah, Revishelf. So REV
How do you spell it?
-A-shelf. And they have their own website. We can order all of those inserts for you if you just want to add something to an existing cabinet. R-E, it's R as in Rebecca, E as in, I don't know, Everest, V as in Victor. So it's Rev Shelf.
Oh, okay. All right.
And then Hafele is another one who does a lot of inserts. I think it's H-A-F-E-L-E.
Yeah.
L-E, okay. And then if you're just buying, if you realize that you can only really have a regular oven stove, I'd like to get a slide-in electric, but I was planning on having a standard microwave above it. Do you think that that's enough clearance?
There's enough clearance. You can get enough clearance because the bottom of a micro hood is not considered combustible. So I usually mount them like 3 inches above the bottom of the cabinets to give you a little extra space for like big pots and pans and stuff. I don't like having it right in my face. But yeah, it's not a problem. I've never seen a code problem to stack microwave. The appliances that tend to have more strict requirements as far as clearance goes are sort of the pro style gas ranges with really high BTU. And if you have a range like that, you do not want a micro hood anyway. It's not going to do the job for you. So that would be a mismatch. But if you're doing an electric range with a micro hood, you don't really have to worry about clearances.
And then for either of you, do you recommend contractors, flooring people, painters, things like that?
We do. We have a lot of contractors who we have long relationships with at Mid-Cape. So if you don't have a contractor, we can definitely give you some names of people we know do really great work. So.
Right.
Thank you. Well, this has been really nice and helpful. Thank you so much for doing it.
Good, I'm
You're
glad.
most welcome.
Is that all for questions, or are there any follow-ups? All right. Well, just so you all know, it does take a little bit, but I will be posting this to our YouTube page, and I will put the link in the email that I send out with the contact information, just so you all know. If you think of anything after watching, feel free to reach out to myself or either of the emails listed, Lisa or Becky.
Okay, great.
That's great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for showing up.